Just recently, I passed my private pilot check ride. I wanted to make this video to talk about the reality of what it's like to go from 0 hours with no aviation experience at all to being a private pilot in 2025, talk about some of the costs, your kind of different opportunities, different paths you can go, Part 61, Part 141, and just share my true experience, kind of the timeline, and what you maybe are going to expect if you follow a path similar to mine. The truth is, my whole life I really had no interest in aviation or planes, and a lot of it just came from the fact that I was scared of heights. Growing up, I did not want to ride roller coasters, and I just completely hated heights. Looking over anything like a cliff or on the edge of a rooftop parking garage, like that stuff just, I didn't like how it felt. So aviation and flying was something that just, I don't know, it never appealed to me because when you get up in the plane, you're up in the sky, so didn't want to deal with the heights. But in 2023, I was like, you know what? I can't be scared this whole time. So I signed up for a discovery flight at a local airport, and to be honest, I hated it. I got in the plane and I was like, what is this thing? I mean, I was just amazed how archaic and small these older Cessnas were. But I didn't realize at the time, this was my kind of my first step into what general aviation as a student pilot can look like. And I didn't realize these older Cessnas and these trainers, that's pretty much the status quo, and that's what you're gonna expect unless you go to maybe a high-end Cirrus training center or a high-end student center where you might be using newer equipment. But a lot of these smaller Part 61, you're gonna be in these older planes. So we went up. The CFI let me take the controls for a little bit, and honestly, just even putting any control input on the yoke and the rudders, I was so afraid. I think we flew around pretty much at about 3,500 feet, and I was just the whole time just wanting to go back. And I remember when we touched down, I think I have a video of us on final, but I was just so happy when the wheels touched, the mains touched down, and that was it. Didn't want to fly again. And then fast forward about a year and a half, almost 2 years later, I was watching some F-35s in the sky, and I was like, dude, come on. You can't be afraid of this, man. Like, let's get over this. So I was like, you know what? That's it, dude. Just watching those F-35s, I was like, you know what? I'm probably not going to get the opportunity to be in a fighter jet, but let's at least figure out this flying thing. So when I got back, signed up for another discovery flight, and this time I kind of had a little bit more confidence going into it and realized, okay, maybe this is something I can do. And so this time, here we are officially beginning flight school at this small Part 61 school. That they had some planes, but you could tell they were, I think that plane I was flying in was the main plane I flew in was a 1966 172. And and what I always think is kind of funny is I'm like, the flight school that in 2023 that I thought, if I liked the discovery flight, I was gonna fly in. It was based out of Alliance, which is like an 11,000 foot. It's a really long strip, super wide. But here I am at this flight school at Hicks Airfield, which is like 3,500 feet long, 60 feet wide. Such an intimidating field to fly in and out of as a student pilot, but I'm so happy that that's the direction I went. Just going from one of those really much smaller fields into an airport like Alliance or Meacham, the confidence you have is just completely different. So I'd say my first 20 to 20, about first 20 hours, honestly, I still had that fear of just heights and being up in the sky and being in these older planes. And then I would say around the 20-hour mark, that comfort level started to come back. And whenever I would get in the plane, it felt a little bit better. It wasn't like one day I was, kind of hesitant to get in, and then one day I was like, oh, this is nothing. It was definitely more of like a gradual taper. But yeah, if you're hesitant to flying in small planes, you may have a similar situation to me, and it's not something you should be, afraid of. Just give yourself kind of time of training and be like, you know what, I may require a little bit longer than other students who don't have that fear of heights and fear of small planes. But yeah, just give yourself that extra bit of time, and that time just being in the plane is going to build your comfort level so much. So starting off at training, pretty much, starting off with just basic maneuvering, holding a heading, climbs, descents. That's pretty much what it started off with for me. And then quickly it transitioned into just beating up the traffic pattern, starting off with becoming more proficient with takeoffs. I still remember my first like true takeoff where the instructor didn't have to put in any inputs, and man, that was such a good feeling. I just remember being like, I can't believe I just did that. And then, of course, at the landing, that's a completely even different feeling. Just that's where, as a student pilot, most people are probably going to struggle the most, is getting used to landings, being in that ground effect and having control over the plane with energy management, airspeeds. I would say for me that was a big struggle in my training as a private pilot, was just energy management. I would always kind of come in way faster and carrying in too much energy, which on a strip like Hicks, you can't really get away with. Say I was training at Alliance, you have, 10,000 plus feet, you can come in hot and there's going to be space for you to bleed off that energy. But when you're flying in these smaller fields, you don't have an opportunity. You got to be on with your airspeeds, being able to hit certain touchdown points. So yeah, my first part of training, just working for that first solo, I remember being out of all my flying, I know a lot of people get really nervous for the check ride, and I was extremely nervous, but nothing compares to the nerves, probably honestly in my life, than my first solo. I was just, I think I just fully didn't believe in myself at the time, and my instructors, were telling me I was ready, but I didn't want to believe that. And yeah, that first solo flight, such a crazy feeling. You look over, just like everyone says, and you're just like, I can't believe it's all up to me. Whether I get this plane back in one piece. But yeah, made some, landings that I'd be super disappointed in now, but at least I got on the ground. So got my solos, um, and then started to work towards solo cross country. That was really exciting. That was also, my nerves were pretty high for that, but compared to my first solo, I think they were a little bit better. One of my favorite parts during training was doing the solo, where going to a minimum of 150 nautical miles in 3 different airports. I remember that flight was just so relaxing overall. It was scary, a bit scary just being out there all alone, but it was just so cool being able to navigate and fly, truly by yourself, make all your appropriate calls at the different fields. But yeah, as a student pilot, some advice I would say if you're going to get into trying to get your private pilot, just like give yourself some grace, give yourself some time to maybe learn the things that you struggle with, because I think each student, there's a certain area that they're going to struggle with, and then other people will be more proficient in other areas. But just don't beat yourself up over that, because I think there was a period that's what I was doing, and you don't want to do that, because then when you go out to fly, you're going out to these lessons, you're like, man, it doesn't feel fun anymore. You don't want to lose that. So just realize, don't try and rush it. I think there was a period I was like, I just want to get this done. I want to get this done. And now I look back at it and I'm like, even though, it took longer than expected, I'm happy it did, because I feel more equipped. So yeah, then once you meet all your requirements, you got your solo time, your cross country time, you got your night time, your simulated instrument, your towered solo. Once you get all that done, it's pretty much just check ride prep, getting really good at your maneuvers, your steep turns, your stalls, turns around a point. I'm trying to think, probably missing some other, but yeah, getting really proficient with those. And then once you're ready, then it's just kind of a waiting game, depending where you're at, being able to schedule time with the DPE, and also trying to find a time that's just going to work well with the weather. For me, my first check ride, we had to cancel it because the weather looked like it might have improved, and so we did the oral section first, and that went well. As long as you study a good amount and look at a bunch of study guides, I think the private pilot oral is nothing to stress too much about. So we got that done, and I was like, dang it, I really wanted to just get this all done in one day, but the weather wasn't cooperating. So we had to reschedule, which is tough because these DPEs, they have a tough job. They have so many students constantly wanting check rides, and you're just one of them. But luckily got another date on, and that date as well, the time that we scheduled, ceilings were too low and we had some convective areas near us, so I was like, oh my gosh. So luckily what happened though is our time was scheduled kind of more towards the morning. So we're like, all right, let's just give it till 4:35 and we'll make a decision. And by that time, it just all worked out. Everything dissipated, the winds died down, and it ended up being probably one of my most relaxing flights during my whole journey, which is so funny to say because when you think of a check ride, it's something that there's a lot at stake and there's a lot of nerves there, but it ended up being such a relaxing flight. But yeah, that's something I wish I could have told myself, earlier in this training process was like, don't try and rush and see how quickly you can get this done. Because at the end of the day, you want to be a safe, proficient pilot. And when it was time for my check ride, I was so happy because I truly felt prepared. There wasn't really much doubt in my head when I was getting into that plane with the DPE. I had a really good feeling. I was like, I got this. It's time to just show what I've got. And I think, say I took that check ride a bit earlier, that's when doubt starts to creep in and you don't know if you can really complete these maneuvers to the ACS standards and fly appropriately. So one thing I would say as a student pilot, give yourself more money, give yourself more of a budget, a buffer room, because you may take more hours and more training than expected, which is fine. And then also, I had about 5 different instructors, which was good in some ways because I got to hear a bunch of different opinions. But then in other ways, I feel like it kind of slowed down my ability to progress because one person didn't really understand where that person, left off from. So sometimes we were repeating things and the progress wasn't as quick as it could have been with less instructors. So if you find an instructor you really like, maybe stick to one or two. Is what I'd recommend. And then another thing that I really messed up with is in the beginning of my training, I was like, hey, I'll just like schedule a flight a week. And I didn't realize with flying, it's something you want to try and fly as often as possible. Because if you schedule that one flight per week, weather happens, maintenance, something, you can end up stacking a time block of just no flying, which as an early student pilot is the worst thing you can do. You need to build that confidence, you need to build that proficiency, and the only way to do that is just fly often. So if I could go back earlier on, I would have flown more often. Towards the end, I really started to fly, 3, 4 times a week, and that helped me a lot. But yeah, with flying and going into training, it's already stressful enough. So on the financial side of things, try and make sure that you have a good bulk of that money just ready to go. You don't want to be there, taking out unnecessary loans or really struggling financially. So make sure you got the finances to back that. And I'll probably do a more in-depth video about what I spent and all the equipment. Also, get a good headset. Just go with some Bose A20s. Just straight away, just if you're gonna fly, you're gonna fly. So just get top of the line gear. And for comms, just being able to hear, you want to have some great headset. But yeah, the truth of becoming a private pilot in 2025 is it's pretty expensive. You're looking upwards of $20,000 in reality, unless you're just someone who can set aside, a ton of time and fly every day, and you pick on you maybe just don't have that type of fear that I had with aviation at first, and you jump into a plane and you feel comfortable. Then I think you can get your private pilot, under 15,000. But after buying headset, iPad Mini, ForeFlight, all these things add up. You're probably looking at about $20,000 in 2025. It's just the raw truth. You'll see people advertise early, lower than that, but it's better to be safe and kind of expect more. And for timeline, I would say give yourself, unless you have a really open schedule and you want to fly all the time, I would say give yourself, 6 to 8 months. I know some people want to rush and get it done quick, but with something like flying, you got to let those concepts and things kind of get to a point of better understanding, and you don't want to just be rushing into things. And so I feel like a 6 to 8 month time span is actually pretty ideal for private pilot. And then once you're private pilot and you're going on to your other ratings, you already kind of know what to expect with training, and that's where I think you can really start to accelerate. But your private pilot, take your time, don't beat yourself up, and if you were like me and you were hesitant to fly, just give it another shot, give it a couple lessons, and I think most people fall in love with aviation. And for me, it's been so helpful just changing the way I think and my mindset, just risk mitigation. in general. It's been amazing. But yeah, so lucky that got to get my private pilot certificate recently, starting my instrument training soon. And yeah, I hope if you guys are getting into aviation and if you have any questions, I don't know a ton, but I have people that I know that are deeper into this. So feel free to leave any questions down below what training is like at a Part 61 school in 2025, and I'll try and answer that. But I hope this video is helpful. I'll catch you guys in the next one.